What's up, fellow polymaths? In this video of the Java Fundamentals tutorial, we'll be going over Lambda expressions. Lambda expressions are a short block of code which takes in parameters and returns a value. Lambda expressions are similar to methods, but they don't need a name and can be implemented in the body of a method. Lambda expressions were added in Java 8, and they facilitate functional programming and simplify the development. Lambda expressions reduce the amount of code required to produce the same result. Expressions have to immediately return a value, and they cannot contain variables, assignments, or statements such as the if statement or for loop. In order to do more complex operations, a code block can be used with curly braces. If the lambda expression needs to return a value, then the code block should have a return statement. So here we have the lambda syntax. The first lambda syntax is the simplest lambda expression. It just has one parameter followed by an expression. From the parameter, you have a hyphen and then the greater than symbol followed by the expression that you want. To use more than one parameter, you just drop the parameters in parentheses. And if you're using a code block, you do the same as the above, followed by the code block where the expression will go. With lambdas, there are different terms that you should know. With type declaration, the type of a parameter doesn't need to be declared. The compiler can infer the type of a parameter. This means you don't have to explicitly code for the parameter of that type. With parentheses, for one parameter, no parentheses is required. For parentheses, as we mentioned before in the syntax section, for one parameter, no parentheses is required. For multiple parameters, parentheses are required. With curly braces, for single statements, curly braces are not required. But for multiple statements, a code block is required. And with the return keyword, if there's only one expression, then the compiler automatically returns the value. Curly braces are required to indicate that the expression returns a value. So just a little bit more before we move on to the code. Lambda expressions can be stored in variables if the variable's type is an interface, which has only one method, which is also known as a functional interface. The lambda expression should have the same number of parameters and the same return type as that method. The consumer interface is an example of a type of functional interface that can be used for this, which are commonly used by lists. And this is located in the java.util package. To use a lambda expression in a method, the method should have a parameter with a single method interface as its type. Calling the interface's method will run the lambda expression. So if some of this stuff is sound confusing to you, we could go into the code and try out some lambda expressions just so that you could get a good understanding of how it works. Alright, so here we're in the code editor, and we're going to be testing out some lambda expressions. So I'm going to be creating a list, and we're going to be outputting all the elements of that list. Alright, so I created some code that uses a linked list, and we call this linked list a list of continents, and I pretty much added all the continents in the world. So let's run this right now and see what happens. Alright, so we got our output all the way from Africa to South America. So we got the 7 continents, and pretty much what I did is that after I added all the continents, I called the for each method, which is a new feature in Java 8, by the way, which can utilize lambdas. So what happens in this for each method is that we have this variable or parameter called continents, and then we use a lambda, which is the hyphen and then the greater than sign. And within that, we have the curly braces, which is our statement. And then we pretty much print out the list of continents. So that's a pretty quick example of being able to use lambdas. Another way to use lambdas is to use the consumer interface to store a lambda expression in a variable. So let's do that right now. All right, so I added the code for the consumer interface. And what we're doing here is we're using the consumer interface that'll store a lambda expression in a variable. And our variable here is called consumer variable, creative, of course. And with that consumer variable, we're pretty much going to do what we did before with getting the list of continents from the println output. And then this will pretty much list all the continents from that consumer variable. Let's run the code right now. All right, so we got the same result. Pretty much all the continents have been outputted. This is just another way to utilize the lambdas as well as for each loop. So you pretty much use whatever works for what specifically you're doing. So now that we've done that, let's do a bit more with lambda expressions. All right, so here I created an interface in the math class called calculation, and what this is going to do is that it's going to utilize a math result method in the interface, taking in 2 parameters, both double data types, and it will return a double value. So let's go to the main method and output the math result method. All right, so here I added the code into the main method. I also added another method in the main class called a result that returns a double. What this result method does is that it allows us to call that method through the main object that we created for the main class. It takes in 3 parameters, the 2 double variables, as well as that calculation interface that we had, and we're basically returning the calculate result that we created from that calculation interface. So let's run this right now and I'll explain what's happening. All right, so we got our result. We have the addition, which is 30, the subtraction, which is -10, multiplication is 200, and division is 0.5. So basically what's happening is that I created an object from the main class, and what we're doing on here is on line 21 through 24 is that we're taking that calculation interface and then we're utilizing that to assign that variable, those variables, add, subtract, multiply, and divide as a lambda expression. So that calculation comes from this interface calculation on line 9 to line 11. After we assign those lambda expressions as variable, from line 26 to line 29, we're going to we call the result method that we created between lines 13 and 15 using the main object. We're passing in the two numbers, which are both doubles, as well as the calculation variable. So if we look at the result method, we see that it's returning that calculate result that was passed in the parameter dot the math result, and that math result comes from the calculation interface as a method. So that's how we're able to get these results. So basically this is another way to be able to make code more cleaner. Try this out on your own and test it out and experiment with different data types as well, and you'll start to get the hang of it. All right, here's our assignment for this topic. Number 1, true or false. Parentheses are required when utilizing more than one parameter. Number 2, true or false. Curly braces are not necessary when writing an expression with more than one statement. Number 3, write a program that creates a list object and add 5 elements to the list. Use a lambda expression to output the 5 elements to the command line. If this video was of any value to you, then please leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.